Global handset market is growing. Take a look at shares of Motorola over the past year. It's doing well today, up about 1%, and it has done well over the last year. But what if this is as good as it gets at this point? That's according to Ping Zhao. She's senior telecom analyst at CreditSight.
Well, let's take a look at the intraday chart of the Dow Industrials now with a very nice 41-point gain. Began this morning with a sort of negative reaction to the General Motors earnings report, actually a loss report that was worse than expected, and maybe some sort of hangover from last night's tech earnings, Intel and others. But then after Alan Greenspan started talking and people started to digest what he said and what he meant, the industrials moving up 40 points. And NASDAQ, similar trajectory there, as you see, spending most of the morning until lunchtime, about 1 o'clock, below the red, and then moving up. And S&P, the same thing. There was the story of the day, and we're going to finish at the or near the highs of the day. Ron Muhlenkamp is our portfolio manager at the Muhlenkamp Fund, Bob Pisani at the New York Stock Exchange, and Leslie LaRoche is at NASDAQ. Let me go to Bob first. Wrap it all up for us, Bob.
Look, there's one question that traders, I asked traders all throughout the day, and that was on the minds of everybody, and is why is everybody so bullish all of a sudden? We have seen a remarkable move in the indices. You couldn't keep this thing down today. All right, blame it on Alan Greenspan? I don't know. Blame it on low oil? I don't know. Blame it on China's GDP growth stronger than expected? I got a lot of that. I don't know. There's a confluence of events here. I wonder, Tyler, if we could just put up the volatility index, the VIX. This is a measure of fear in the market, and it's a way, it simply measures volatility in options pricing, and it's a fear indicator. It dropped below 10 today. Was that important? It hasn't done that in 11 years. What does it mean? It means that the fear is very, very low. It's an indication of how bullish we are. It's now a little bit over 10, but intraday it was below 10. Boy, that means that people are pretty complacent out there right now. They are just feeling strong. We have a 2-to-1 advance in the decline line today. GM was weak, Intel was weak. They didn't seem to care. Tyler?
Ron Muhlenkamp, welcome. And I should disclose that my son has a custodial account in your fund. It's done very well. Thank you for that. You're a value guy. Are there still values?
Yes, there's still values.
Where are they?
Earnings growth. Most companies today are pretty well run. For their earnings to grow nicely, it means their revenues have to grow nicely.
Do you see that happening?
We do. Well, again, it's the companies who are beating their competitors. The easy way to describe it is look at what your son owns in our portfolio, and my congratulations to your son and thanks. But we actually, as I say, in the quarterly reports, we're looking at revenue growth. We want to know where the consumer's spending their money. We want to know where companies are spending their money. And if your top line is growing nicely, and as you know, we always start with profitability, return on shareholder equity. We're finding a number of companies whose returns are nice, whose growth is nice, and the PE's below their ROE. So yes, we like this market. I'm complacent, if you will. I'm complacent.
Right. I wish I could take credit for choosing your fund. It was actually a gift from his godfather, but it was the nicest gift he got as a young boy. Leslie LaRoche, go ahead.
It was a fascinating day in the markets, Tyler. Let me walk you through this, because at 2187, 2188, doesn't matter either number, we are at closing at a 4-year high for the NASDAQ. That happened without the participation of Intel, and I would call it a plunge of 4.5%. It happened without the participation of Yahoo, which plunged 11%. It happened without really much help from Microsoft, which only climbed by 4 cents a day. How interesting that is. What we saw today was semiconductors getting out there and rallying despite the disappointments of Intel merely committing the crime of merely meeting expectations, and the same thing happened for Yahoo. We saw chip equipment rise. We saw some of the other big cap techs get kind of muddle higher, but we had some good solid gains in the mid caps and in the Russell, in the small cap indices. So I wanted to get a sense from Ron about where he thinks that the Russell and the mid cap or the small caps are going to go from here on out.
Ron?
We think your headlines are going to be set by the people we don't think of as headliners. What she just described is a fairly broad strength in the marketplace without necessarily the quote headliners doing it. We think that continues. We think it's going to be company specific. We think it's going to be stock specific. As you're seeing, where companies report good news, they respond very nicely. And on the contrary, where they report bad news, they get taken apart. But we had very strong markets throughout
But Yahoo
03 and
Intel,
04.
it wasn't bad news, really. It was that they just didn't meet inflated street expectations. In and of themselves, the reports were fairly solid.
Well, see, now, if you're Intel, you have to live up to street's expectations. If you're something that is not a, quote, headliner, then all you have to do is be pretty good.
You know, Ron, let me jump in, because I want you to explain something to me, and it's this. If I'm a long-term investor buying a company because I think its value is ultimately going to be borne out in the market, do I care on any given day whether an Intel or another company exceeds or fails to match investor analyst expectations? Don't I really care whether the daggone thing is making money?
In a word, no, you don't care about the daily any more than I care how much it rained today.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about Bob's point, and that is, just quickly, fear is apparently at a low point. Does that worry you?
Well, I'm not sure that the VIX is a good measure of fear. First of all, as he mentioned, VIX is a thing that people monitor. We don't really know what it looks like over a cycle. I'm not sure that it's a good measure of fear.
Okay. Ron, thanks very much. Ron Muhlenkamp, mutual fund manager. And there are the folks. Thank you very much, Ron, Leslie, Bob. Folks from, well, that would be Plantronics. Ken Canapan is ringing the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange. And Ted Arnaud, he's the CEO of MTR Gaming Corporation, ringing the gong there at the NASDAQ. That'll do it for trading on this Wednesday, July 20th, 2005. I'm Tyler Matheson. Thanks for being with us. The closing bell hour 2 continues now with Maria Bartiromo.
From the world leader in business news, this is The Closing Bell. Live at CNBC's global headquarters, Maria Bartiromo.
And good afternoon. Multiple wins on Wall Street today. For the first time, the NASDAQ is closing in on positive territory for the year. It is at a 4-year high, now positive for 2005. The S&P 500 finishes at a fresh 4-year high today, and the Russell 2000 index, home to small caps, is at an all-time high. Plus, the Dow transports are soaring more than 3%. Today's market story, analysis, and outlook moments away. Also today on the Bell.
Interview since being forced out as chairman of the New York Stock Exchange nearly 2 years ago, and he talks to us. Dick Grasso, would he ever settle with New York Attorney General Eliot Spitzer? And what about all that money? I'm Scott Cohn. I'll have the story coming up.
Thanks, Scott. But first up, new highs on Wall Street. Starting with the NASDAQ, it is finishing the day on the upswing. It is at a 4-year high, the first multi-year high we have seen for the NASDAQ in quite a while. The NASDAQ today up 15 points at a 4-year high, up 0.75% at 2188. The S&P 500 also reaching a 4-year high today, the second straight day it has achieved that mark on the S&P 500 with a gain on the day of 5.75 points. The Russell 2000 index even better. It's at an all-time high for the index. Take a look at small cap stocks doing very well. Highest level ever, all-time high, up 8 2/3 points today, with the Russell now at 677.5. The Dow Industrials hasn't broken out the way the other indexes have. However, today's gain is good enough for a 3-month high on the Dow, up 42 points, 0.33% at 10,688. Take a look at the Dow Transportation Index. Meanwhile, that is at a 3-month high after a very strong rally today of almost 4% on the Dow Transportation Average. Right to our stock market reporters on that note. Bob Pisani at the New York Stock Exchange, Leslie at NASDAQ. Bob?
Well, the key point here, Maria, is that it was an amazing day. What was amazing about it? The bullishness level hasn't been this high in a long time. You can feel it on the floor. You can feel it when you call trading desks, and you can see it when you look at the market internals. Take a look at the markets today and what's been going on here. Let's just call it mixed earnings. GM was a major disappointment, and even some people weren't happy with Intel, although it looked okay. The bottom line, though, is the S&P, as you heard from me, advanced to another 4-year high. The markets are like a rock, one trader said. They just don't go down here. 2-to-1 advancing the declining stocks. That's positive overall. What's moving the market? What's up, and why are people optimistic? A lot of traders I talk to are still underweight the market. You would think they'd be all in by now, but no, there's still cash on the sideline. The big story is the the growth story continues. People are buying into the idea that the economy is okay and will continue to do well. Mr. Greenspan this morning talking about sustained economic growth, contained inflation, although implied rates will still go up. People liked what he had to say. No big stories there. Strong China GDP, 9.5% in the first half of the year. That happened this morning. A lot of people said China's still continuing to grow. And the result is traders continue to believe cyclicals will lead the way. So transportation stocks moved up, metal stocks, material stocks, all of them were strong on the day. That's certainly important. How bullish were people? Take a look at the VIX, which is a measure of volatility, a measure of fear in the market. It dropped below 10 for the first time since 1994. That according to people over at Miller Tabak. Take a look at some of the big stock movers here throughout the day. Transports were monstrous. CNF had some positive comments in the transport group. One of the big truckers, that stock was strong. Honeywell also had comments. They guided above analyst estimates for the full year. Altria beat expectations and raised guidance for the year. Pfizer had inline guidance for the year. Eastman Kodak, one of the big disappointments. That was a big miss. It was down, but off of the lows. General Motors, same story. They had a big miss, and they were off their lows for the year. Another group moving, tech stocks, and you know it. A lot of people love it when techs move, and they moved today, didn't they, Leslie?
They moved today, Bob. All we had to do was close above 2175 to set a four-year high, and indeed we did that. Let's talk about this tech rally because the Nasdaq at four-year highs. We are looking though for any possible resistance at 2191, which was the intraday high for 2005, set on the very first trading day of the year. Semiconductor rally, one-year high for the stocks, and that is despite a plunge by Intel, and the biotechs were basically they zoomed higher in the wake of Amgen. The biotech index is at four-year highs. Look at these closing prices. These are big moves indeed. Intel off 4.5%. Amgen up 15%. Amgen guided higher for the year. Yahoo down 11%. Inline results. The street needed a beat. Let's talk very quickly about some internet previews. We'll hear from Google shortly in the next day or so. And despite the Yahoo disappointment, Google is expected to post a strong second quarter, gaining market share in search, international expansion driving overall revenue, and eBay Q2 forecasted for 18 cents a share with revenue of just in excess of $1 billion. Look for adjustments for the strong U.S. dollar and perhaps a lackluster 05 outlook because of Forex weakness and a slow start to the third quarter. We'll leave it there for now. We've got earnings rolling in. Maria, back to you.
All right, Leslie, thank you. Let's get right to Joe Kernan because one of those earnings rolling right in is Qualcomm. He's got the numbers, Joe.
Yes, thanks, Maria. I do have Qualcomm. I'm going to go with this pro forma number of 28 cents a share. That's 3 cents ahead of expectations of 25 cents for QCOM. The revenue number for the current quarter is also above expectations. This is the fiscal third quarter, $1.36 billion.